Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, and a very, very good morning. Welcome to the AKEPT Global Series University Presidents Forum in collaboration with University Kebangsaan Malaysia, titled Values-Based Leadership in ASEAN Higher Education. Yang berbahagia Datuk Mansur Osman, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Higher Education, Professor Dr. Nordin Yahya, Director, Higher Education Leadership Academy, AKEPT, Professor Dato Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Vice Chancellor, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, Professor Tan Eng Chai, President for National University of Singapore, Datin Dr. Anita Bizi Abdul Aziz, Vice Chancellor, University Brunei Darussalam, Professor Insinyur Panut Mulyono, Rector of Universitas Gajah Mada Indonesia, Mr. Daniel Abdul Rahman, Press Secretary to Malaysia's Finance Minister, Ministry of Finance, Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the AKEPT Global Series University Presidents Forum in collaboration with University Kebangsaan Malaysia with the theme Values-Based in ASEAN Higher Education. Today, we are lucky to have gathered the leaders that are heading among the highest ranking education institutions within the ASEAN region. In establishing their position as the world-class universities, a strong leadership with a clear direction is required. Now, this webinar aims at discussing the high-performance culture within higher education institutions through value-based leadership. As the global economy is undergoing uncertain times and challenges, universities are expected to explore various avenues in dealing with these changes. There is a strong need of value-based leadership in determining clear directions and visions in facing the new frontier. Now, without further ado, let's welcome a pre-recorded speech by Yang Berbahagia Datuk Mansur Osman, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Higher Education of Malaysia, to share his welcoming remarks.
Professor Dr. Nordin bin Yahya, Director of AKEPT, Panelists, Professor Dr. Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Vice Chancellor, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, Professor Tan Eng Chai, President, National University of Singapore, Datin Dr. Anita Bizi Abdul Aziz, Vice Chancellor, University Brunei Darussalam, Professor Insinyur Panut Mulyono, Rector, Universitas Gajah Mada Indonesia, Moderator Mr. Daniel Abdul Rahman, Press Secretary to Malaysia's Finance Minister. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Dear all, warm greetings. Syukur Alhamdulillah that we are here today to listen to the renowned speakers from top universities in ASEAN to speak on value-based leadership in ASEAN higher education. I believe this prestigious event aims to bring university leaders together to share their experiences and thoughts on value-based leadership and what we can learn as a region to strengthen ourselves to make ASEAN higher education institution a prominent global force. And today, we are honored to be given the opportunity to gain insights from our 4 successful ASEAN higher education institution leaders who have shown us their strong leadership, clear vision, and perseverance can escalate ASEAN universities in the eyes of the world. Professor Tan Eng Chai, Professor Dato Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Professor Insinyur Panut Mulyono, and Datin Dr. Anita Bizi. We look forward to listening to all your success stories and how all of you have dealt with the challenges. I wish to personally thank you to those involved in ensuring that the webinar is a success, particularly AKEPT, the Higher Education Leadership Academy, in collaboration with University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this webinar is very timely as the world is currently challenged with global pandemic. In ensuring that we are able to manage the pandemic and what comes after the pandemic, education plays an important role. It is education that makes human beings to act their part in this world successfully. Education is a very important condition for the development of the holistic man and an important vehicle for accelerating the prosperity and well-being of humankind in all directions. The ultimate aim of education is nourishing, developing a socially acceptable and balanced personality, citizen for the nation, for the whole world. In Malaysia, we have embedded the philosophy of education in our falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan or national education philosophy. Here comes the importance of value-based education, which is inseparable from education. Such an education consists of man-making and character-building program, training of body, mind and soul, quest for integrating culture and technology, and hunt for that goal which liberates man from fear, inertia, and ignorance. It is the responsibility of the drivers of education institutions and policymakers to ensure that the true north or the higher mission education goals can be achieved. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected through intricate networks in technology-laden environments, leadership has become exponentially more complex. Thus, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous context, compounded by COVID-19 pandemic, has disrupted long-held leadership constructs. Current and future leaders now require new skills to lead competently in this rapidly iterating ecosystem. A strong value-based leadership is required to establish value-based education and to ensure continuity and sustainability, at the same time dealing with transformations and coping mechanisms to deal with the VUCA situation. Dear all, I would like to thank the organizers for this event, AKEPT and UKM, for your collaboration in organizing this event. I was made to understand that there will be more global talk series in the pipeline and look forward to more of these collaborative efforts in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that all of you will gain great insights from the knowledge imparted into this webinar session. We hope that all of you are inspired and motivated through the success stories and struggles shared by these great higher education institution leaders of our ASEAN region. With that, I wish all of you a great time and may today's webinar be a successful one. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Yang Berbahagia Datuk, for the speech. It is true that in this trying time, the higher education institutions need to adapt to newer needs and challenges that comes along with time if we still want to remain relevant within the industry. Now, depending on where you are, we hope that this morning, this afternoon, or this night will be a fruitful event to get insights from among the top ASEAN leaders. Without further ado, I would now like to introduce the moderator for this webinar. Mr. Daniel Rahman is the press secretary to Malaysia's finance minister. Currently, he is in the thick of action in the rolling out of Malaysia's various economic stimulus packages, Prihatin and Penjana, worth over 295 billion ringgit. Now, these packages are aimed at stimulating Malaysia's economy, which has been severely impacted by COVID-19. This includes various incentives to protect and support jobs, as well as an upskill and reskilling the people. Having started his career as a lawyer, Daniel has worked in policy, technology, and education, serving both Malaysia's education and higher education ministries. An avid writer, he has been the columnist for The Star, Malaysia's #1 English daily since 2014. Recently, he hosted his own television show on Bernama, where he interviewed CEOs, professors, social media influencers, and communications experts. In 2016, he was a US State Department IVLP Fellow and studied in the role of political communications with the electoral process. Mr. Daniel is often invited to give talks and share his views on artificial intelligence and technology trends, media and fake news, as well as education and society. Daniel has a postgraduate degree in law from Oxford University. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Daniel. The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Latif, for that kind introduction. I thought you were going to cut it and keep it a bit shorter. And of course, I'd like to thank Deputy Datuk YB, Datuk Mansur Othman, Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Education, for his pre-recorded speech, but very kind of him to share some insights on leadership and development. Professor Dr. Nordin Yahya, the Director of the Higher Education Leadership Academy, our gracious co-host for today's event, and of course, our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, leadership has been a constant feature in humankind's history since time immemorial. Some say even before taxes were invented. Every religion, philosopher, and teacher speaks of leadership as a vital cog in the development of their followers, civilization, as well as learners. Leadership fulfills an innate need within us to provide guidance, direction, and hope. John F. Kennedy, former American president, once said that leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. Whereas in Islam, there's a hadith by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he said, every one of you is a shepherd and everyone is answerable to his flock. In the context of higher education, which we are speaking about today, values-based leadership is growing in importance, especially as the global community of learners faces unprecedented challenges due to COVID-19. And, all of us know almost every speech nowadays starts with, we live in unprecedented times. That's quite a constant, right? So today with our distinguished panel of speakers, we will dissect what values-based leadership means in the context of these challenges and new norm, as well as within ASEAN higher education. Now, allow me to briefly introduce our esteemed panel of speakers. I know their profiles are up on the website, but let me also share with the audience today some background. The first panelist is Professor Tan Eng Chai, President of the National University of Singapore. Hello, Professor Tan, how are you?
Hi, morning.
Morning, great. So Professor Tan was appointed as President of NUS on the 1st of January 2018. He's the university's 5th President and the 23rd leader to head Singapore's oldest higher education institution. Prof. Tan is a passionate and award-winning educator, and he has pioneered many things at NUS, including the special program in science, the University Scholars Program, the University Town Residential Program, the Grade 3 Year, which sounds very interesting, and Technology Enhanced Education. He was also president of the Singapore Mathematical Society, as well as the Southeast Asian Mathematical Society. Prof. Tan, and this caught my eye, is a member of Singapore's Future Economic Council, which is tasked in driving the growth and transformation of the country's future economy. Perhaps I'll ask some questions on that a bit later. Prof. Tan received the Public Administration Medal Gold at Singapore's National Day Award in 2014 for his outstanding contributions to education. He was awarded the Wilbur Lucius Cross Medal, which honors exceptional alumni in the areas of scholarship, teaching, academic administration, and public service by Yale University in 2018. Also in 2018, he was conferred the Honorary Doctor of Science from the University of Southampton in recognition of his achievements as an innovative and exceptional teacher and as a distinguished and respected leader in academia. Prof. Tan, it's very nice to have you with us here today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure too.
All right. And so our next panelist is, of course, our host for today's event, Professor Dato' Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Shukur. I will call him Prof. Hamdi, the Vice Chancellor of University Kebangsaan Malaysia. He was appointed as Vice Chancellor of UKM on the 1st of January 2019 and started his career at the University of Malaya in 1995. And at 2010, at the age of just 39, he was made a full professor. Prof. Hamdi founded the Center of Advanced Manufacturing and Material Processing and recently formed the Center for Research in Industry 4.0. Prof. Hamdi has devoted his career in nurturing research and innovation and has mentored over 150 postgraduate students, particularly in the field of advanced manufacturing and material processing. To date, he has supervised 66 PhD students and has authored over 160 ISI journals with a H-index of 26. In his position, he has also held many leadership positions prior to becoming Vice Chancellor, including the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Academic and International, as well as the Dean of Engineering. In these leadership positions, he has strategized and marked transformation in academics, as well as always aimed to push the universities into the limelight at the international level. Hailing from the southern Malaysian state of Muar Johor, Professor Hamdi received his bachelor's in mechanical engineering from the Imperial College London, with a master's in science in advanced manufacturing technology and system management from the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. And his doctoral study was in the field of thin film coating for biomedical applications, for which he was conferred the PhD by Kyoto University. In 2015-2016, Prof. Hamdi was a visiting professor at the University of California in Los Angeles. Prof. Hamdi, thank you so much for hosting us today and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, is our next member of panel, Datin Dr. Anita Abdul Aziz. She's the Vice Chancellor of University Brunei Darussalam. Dr. Anita was appointed as Vice Chancellor of UBD on the 20th of January 2016. She is the 7th Vice Chancellor and the first female to head the university. Congratulations, Doctor. Under Dr. Anita's leadership, new initiatives included the setting up of the Center for Lifelong Learning, the Institute for Data Analytics, FPT UBD Innovation Lab, the Botanical Research Center, as well as UBD's first overseas campus, the UBD FPT Global Center in Da Nang, Vietnam. Dr. Anita also led UBD into its entry into the QS World University Rankings in 2017 and Times Higher Education Rankings in 2019. Prior to becoming the Vice Chancellor of UBD, Dr. Anita was Deputy Permanent Secretary of Higher Education at Brunei Darussalam's Ministry of Education, and she has held various senior positions at UBD, including Assistant Vice Chancellor and Vice President of Global Affairs, Education and Internationalization, as well as the Dean of Medicine. So Dr. Anita's background is actually as a clinical academic in the field of reproductive medicine and biology. She's also an honorary professor of leadership at Swansea University, UK. Welcome, Dr. Anita, and thanks for joining us today. I know the introductions are quite long, but I would like to... Sorry?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. Thank you.
And our last panelist for me to introduce before we jump right into the questions, because I know there are a lot that would like to ask, is Professor Panut Mulyono, the Rector of Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia, or UGM. Professor Panut was appointed as Rector of UGM in 2017. Previously, he was the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, and he's a Professor of Energy Science in the field of Chemical Engineering System Optimization at Gadjah Mada University. He's a graduate from Tokyo Institute of Technology, Japan in 1990, and obtained his doctorate at the same university in 1993. He serves as the expert board of UGM's Energy Studies Center, and in the field of research has published extensively both locally and internationally. In addition to contributing to education and research, he also is very much active in community service activities, which is something that we'll explore a little bit later. In professional organizations, he's currently listed as a member of organizations such as the Indonesian Engineers Association, PII, and the Association of Chemical Engineers of Japan. That, ladies and gentlemen, is your hopefully brief introduction of all our speakers. I hope I didn't rush through. And so the forum the session will go on for about an hour, and then we'll of course take Q&As from members of the audience. So please feel free to submit. What I'd like to request from the panelists is to keep your answers crisp. And what we can do is we can have more interaction, and feel free to also interact with each other. And if I may begin, is our panelists ready to start?
Yes.
Right. So to start off with, I'd like to ask a very basic question, right? And perhaps Prof. Tan, you can kick us off with this. I noticed that on YouTube, there's a video where you say that all of your children are alumni of NUS. And I think what that suggests is you also subscribe to the values of NUS, which you as president have also molded. So could you share with us a little bit about the core values of your university?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Daniel, and good morning to everyone. First, let me say good morning to my good friends, Professor Hamdi, Professor Anita, and Professor Panut. It's really a privilege, and I thank Professor Hamdi for inviting me to this webinar. So this year we celebrate NUS 115th anniversary. Our aspirations are captured in our vision, mission, and values. Our vision is to be a leading global university shaping the future. And our mission is actually pretty easy. It's predicated on 3 words: to educate, inspire, and transform. And very importantly, the culture of the university is shaped by its value system. And we have identified 5 values that are of critical importance to NUS, and they are innovation, resilience, excellence, respect, and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Tan, for that opening sharing. Next, I'd like to ask Professor Hamdi, what about UKM's key core values that you espouse?
Thank you very much, Daniel, and very good morning to all my colleagues from the ASEAN universities. In UKM, we coined 5 values that we cherish. Number 1 is, which we actually have an abbreviation called KAMI. And KAMI stands for K is keserakanan in Malay language, which is oneness of UKM. We want everyone to actually subscribe to the idea that we are actually one, regardless of different faculties and institute. Secondly is accountability. We wish that everybody will be subscribing to the idea that if you have been given a job and a task, then you are accountable on whatever been given to you. And thirdly is merit, KAM. M is merit, means that we wish that everyone is doing things based on merit. We appoint someone, we get a professor based on merit, not because of whom we know, but rather exactly what the person can establish and also contribute. And I, KMII, is innovation. Again, it's similar to NUS. We cherish and value innovation. We wish everyone will subscribe to innovation. And eventually, the last one is integrity. We wish that integrity become, even though it's number 5, but it's actually encapsulating the whole value system that we have. And it is actually the core of what we believe in. And this value of integrity is very, very important to UKM. And it is becoming the pillar for all the values that we have mentioned just now. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Professor Hamdi. And I'd like to move on straight to Dr. Anita. Can you share with us the core values of your university?
Yeah, sure. But first of all, again, thank you very much to Professor Hamdi for the kind invitation to this platform. And it's also lovely to meet friends from universities in ASEAN. Usually we would meet at least once a year, at least in our AUN platform. So it's lovely to meet you this year, although it's virtually. Regarding values, we put a lot of emphasis on values. I think it's very important to have values in any organization. We also have 5. These values have been in UBD for many years, and it's PEARL, P-E-A-R-L, and P is for people. So we put a lot of emphasis on people of the university, not just staff, but students as well, and the various levels of staff. So people is at the center of what we do. E is expertise. So we put emphasis on expertise, but as well as enhance our expertise each time. The third one is A for aptitude. So it's the ability to learn and adapt and solve problems. R is relevance. So we want to maintain and be ahead as well of the fast changing world. And the last one is L, which is leadership. So leadership is very important, that we emphasize on developing leadership at every level of the university. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Anita. We'll deep dive more into these values in a moment. I'd like to now get to Professor Panut. And Professor, same question to start us off. What are the key core values of your university?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Daniel.
Very good morning. I'm very happy to be here to meet a prominent leader in the ASEAN countries. And special thanks addressed to Professor Hamdi, also Professor Latif, Professor Tan, Datin, Dr. Anita. Thank you so much. Yes, talking about core values, UGM has 2 philosophical values and 5 identities. These 2 philosophical values are Pancasila, 5 principles, the national identity of Indonesia and Indonesian culture. And the second one is knowledge, reality, and trust. Meanwhile, the UGM 5 identities are UGM as national university because UGM is the first national university established by the government after we reached the independence. And the second is a struggle university, or in bahasa Indonesia we call it as Universitas Perjuangan. And the second, and the third is UGM as Pancasila University. This means that Universitas Gadjah Mada based on Pancasila for all of our activities. And the fourth is UGM as people university, and the last is UGM as cultural center university. Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel.
Right. Thank you so much for that opening. I think what we've seen in this first round is just a very diverse set of principles. There's nationalistic patriotism, there's integrity, there's excellence, there's aptitude, there's people, there's expertise, there's merit, innovation. I think it's quite wonderful to see kind of like the myriad. What I've also noticed quite interestingly is all the vice chancellors today seem to come from a science background. And I'm just wondering, maybe we can start with Dr. Anita, who comes from medicine, and doctors usually they diagnose, before they treat. How has your sort of background influenced that leadership style and the shaping of values?
I think not just my medical background. I think for every person, your leadership is shaped by your journey. So I think definitely my medical background has had an impact as well. And I think especially the training and the various jobs, the rotations. And I think what's important in one's journey that shapes your leadership style is actually your ups and downs. That means your troughs and your peaks. And I think especially when you're at the down, which is your trough. And I think what's very important, I think everyone's lives has got its ups and downs. And I think what's important is your learning points. So when you're at your lowest point is what are the things that you can reflect, what you can learn from, and how you can lift yourself from the trough. And I think if you do that frequently, and I think your trust will be less frequent and will be less deep as well. So I think everyone's leadership will be shaped by the journey, I think from birth to up till now. But definitely, as you said, my medical background has certainly helped as well.
All right, thank you. I'd like to move on to Prof. Hamdi. And when Dr. Anita mentioned about the ups and the downs and the journey, perhaps if you could share with us some of the challenges that you kind of went through as part of your journey and how that has shaped your leadership moving forward.
Thank you, Daniel. I look at myself as quite a reluctant leader in the sense that, being a researcher, I enjoy doing research. I enjoy having my postgraduate students and then, getting grants and doing, whatever that researchers are doing. And when it comes to leadership, normally we tend not to accept, but we know that somebody has to do it. Therefore, it is a national service, if I may say. I've been in a leadership role, even though we are trying, I'm personally trying to not to accept it in various occasions, but unfortunately, I'm kind of forced into this position. For me, the most important thing as leaders in facing challenges is the sincerity, and it is very central to the leadership when we are facing a lot of challenges nowadays. If the person is not sincere, a lot of things can't be executed well because there are sometimes lots of personal gain and personal agenda. In the context of Malaysia, for example, a vice chancellor is appointed by the minister, and therefore maintaining the position is a prime important for some. And I do not see that in line with sincerity. So sincerity is very important in being a leader in facing challenges. I think number 2 is humility. We are managing peers in the university. We are not really hierarchical in nature, even though a vice chancellor is up there at the peak of the hierarchy. But truly, it's just peers that we are managing, professors who are our colleagues and our friends. And therefore, it's not the same as in the corporate, in my opinion. So humility is very important, and looking at others not as subordinates, but rather as peers that we have to respect, we have to listen to, we have to have lots of patience in dealing with, because these are great people, great mind, and they are, they are there because of their intelligence and greatness. So humility in the part of leaders are very important in facing such a group of people that they are leading. And thirdly, is all about quality. University is as good as the people that is in there, which are the professors, the professionals, and also the support staff. And we have to ensure that in whatever we do, it is the quality that is number 1. In the context of UKM, we have established what we call as House of Quality, where we have 5 elements, which is number 1, if I may very quickly. Number 1 is research, quality in research, quality in education or academic, and third one, quality in internationalization, which is very important nowadays. And these 3 quality, House of Quality, is supported by 2 pillars, which is talent, everybody who's in the system, and the 5th one is the income generation, which is a challenge in Malaysia. For understanding the background in Malaysian university, so these 5 pillars or 5 House of Qualities have been erected in order to ensure that we will sail and face the challenges successfully.
All right, thank you very much. I like the points on sincerity, humility, and quality, traits often that can be missed because when you're in education, you're dealing with very intellectual people and you're a very prominent role in society. So always remembering your roots is very important. On that, I'd like to move on to Prof. Tan. Prof, one thing about NUS is that it's always sort of seen as a leader within the ASEAN context. What do you see as the challenges in raising the bar of higher education from where you sit?
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. I think we have been quite well ranked in the rankings, but I have always advised my colleagues that rankings only show a particular aspect of what the university does. And it is a good guide, but it by no means show how good you really are, right? So this is very much related also to the humility that Professor Hamdi talked about. That I think we are in an era of unprecedented changes, and it is important that we do not stand still. We must keep pressing ahead, whether it be to improve the quality of education, to ensure that our graduates are better prepared for the ever-changing and complex world, or whether to improve our research so that we build more world-class research in the university. I think these are very much on our concerns as well as on the concerns of all our top universities in ASEAN, right? So I see a lot of similarities, and I also see a lot of opportunities that universities can work together. I think as a leader, I think a leader has to be dynamic and determined, right? So dynamism is important. And of course, at the very base of it is, again, what Professor Hamdi said, that sincerity, right? If somebody has his or her personal agenda, then we have to be very careful, because that person may put the interest, his or her interest, before the university's interest, right? Our job is really to move the university, and personal interest sometimes can stand in the way, right? So that sincerity and genuineness is very important. The other thing, again, related to what Professor Hamdi had said, universities is about talents. It's about our talented students, talented faculty members, talented staff, talented alumni. All right, that's the whole university community.
That's right.
And one thing that I believe very strongly is synergy. How do we synergize the talents across that different functionalities, be it admin, academic, research, alumni, and students? How do we synergize and having individuals and team work closely and collaboratively towards a common goal? Right, that would be a big challenge, and I think this would be even more important in this rapidly changing and ever complex world, and with the numerous disruptions and huge challenges that face all of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to point on talent, students, staff, and faculty, as well as the synergy across the spectrum. I'm going to go to Prof. Panut now, and I'd like to ask a question, because in your profile, you mentioned that you were also very much involved in community-based service and activities. So as part of that synergy, Professor, what are your thoughts on the university's role in the context of the community?
Okay, yes. Thank you so much. Yes, the university has a very important role to the community. Yeah, and the Universitas Gadjah Mada has do a lot of things with the community, and we do the community service for the community. And UKM deployed thousands of students all over the Indonesia, and they do a lot of activity to educate the people in the remote area, develop all of the for example, how to use the energy, develop the farming, and so on. So the impact of the university to the community should be increased annually. And in this case, UKM has done a lot of the SDGs, yeah, 17 SDGs goal. And until now, we do a lot of community services, and also in helping the community in facing COVID. Now, UKM has done a lot of research and produced a lot of medical devices, yeah, to help the community in facing the pandemic of COVID-19. So the role of the university to the community is very important. And I think the ASEAN University already done for this area. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So what we've done is a round about a bit of your personal backgrounds and a bit of looking at this university as a community. Next, I'd like to ask a little bit about ASEAN. And how the question goes is, in moving forward, ASEAN universities are facing similar challenges to our Western counterparts. What are the areas of strength and what are the areas of improvement? Perhaps we can ask Prof. Hamdi to start off this part.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Daniel. It's a very good question. Looking at ASEAN, we have around 600 million people residing in that region, and is a very fast-growing region, probably one of the fastest in the world, with the GDP much more than any other region. Mm-hmm. And these 600 million people in ASEAN, they are young, they are vibrant, and they work very hard. I think the strength of ASEAN is the collaboration between these countries. Mm-hmm. We have the peaceful region in comparison to the rest. And that's number one, very peaceful, despite having multiracial and multi-religious and multi-ethnic countries mainly. But we live in harmony and work together very well. We respect each other in terms of each country members. So the peaceful is, this people nature of ASEAN is, I think, the strength which we should leverage on. Secondly is the culture of ASEAN. It is well known all around the world that ASEAN people are very friendly. They are very easy to go with, and people are very nice in ASEAN. So due to this culture of ASEAN, I think we can attract lots of potential students from all over the world to come over to ASEAN countries. Mm-hmm. I think the third one is the focus of most of ASEAN countries. They are focusing on education. We value, in ASEAN region, we value education very strongly. And the emphasis and the money that we put in by each country member, for example, is huge. Malaysia put a huge amount of money into education, more than 60 billion of the GDP, for example. And that is the largest allocation in terms of distribution of the GDP. So the focus on education in most of ASEAN countries is heavy, and it shows that the ASEAN member countries are pushing in for the citizen to be educated. We have much less percentage of people with degree, for example, in comparison to the Western world, but the number is catching up very well. So all these three elements of strength, I think, is where the ASEAN countries has got the strength and should be focused on. But we, at the same time, have got weaknesses as well, where we still have got a lot of talent to build up. Our talents are still young, and the way we are doing things, for example, in terms of the bureaucracy and the system, the process, I think a lot of improvement need to be done there. We are not having full autonomy in comparison again with the Western world.
Would that be something that we should strive towards, greater autonomy within the higher education space?
I believe so, because if we look at the Western world, we look at America and England, for example, or the European countries, the universities are very autonomous, and they have huge rights when they have this autonomy. And due to that, we can see university flourish. Stifling autonomy by lots of bureaucratic regulations and imposing rules and with whatever that the ministry wants, I think that probably hinder a little bit. So it is important to let the university go and flourish, because it has been the case in many top universities in the world. I believe so that we are moving towards that, particularly for the Malaysian government, for example. We have a blueprint to actually release the university from bureaucratic processes and let them be on their own. Of course, it is a process. It will be getting there sooner or later. And we can see that by moving in that direction, university in Malaysia and in ASEAN I think will flourish even.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof, for those insights. I'd like to move on to Prof. Tan and also ask him, what can ASEAN offer to the wider education community based on where we are right now?
Well, thank you very much. I fully agree with what Dato' Hamdi had mentioned about ASEAN. The ASEAN universities are deeply connected to their communities, and they serve very important functions, right, of enhancing the manpower for their respective countries. They also have very local as well as global orientations, which are now needed since we are very much a global world, despite the recent tensions between China and US. But I still think that in itself, ASEAN, with 650 million people, we have a tremendous pool of talents. All right. The ASEAN region will grow. And in fact, it is one of the fastest growing area, like what Professor Hamdi has mentioned. But I would say that the growth may not be evenly spread.
All right. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think there are growth in certain sectors, but there's less growth in important sectors. So like, for instance, if you take the area of emerging technologies,
right?
These are actually all led by, I would say, China and US.
Right.
Rest, I think we do have tremendous talents in these areas, in digital technologies, right? But we are in a way catching up, right? And therein, I think there are some weaknesses within the ASEAN region. How well universities are connected to their local industries, right? Because it means how well the graduates of the ASEAN universities articulate into the industries,
into the markets that exist, right?
Because this is about employment, right? Employment of really the talents of the respective countries. You have to have an economy that has the capacity to absorb these talents, right? And you also have to have the universities to make sure that they educate and train these graduates properly, right? And so that they can articulate better into the industry. So that connection between industry and university will be one important consideration. The other consideration is in terms of the support by the government.
Okay.
It is true that all governments in ASEAN believes in the importance of education.
Right.
It is also true that all governments are stretched in terms of the resources that they could provide. But my sense is that ASEAN universities would require a stronger level of support from their respective governments.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right, and that is important. Resources are important because it allows universities, right, to build up their infrastructure, to be able to hire and train very good people, so that the quality of these people are sort of commensurate with those in top institutions elsewhere. So these are the
Professor, thanks. Yeah. Oh, thank you. So I was going to say, if you could hold that thought, because we'll come back to the point on talent in a while. I'd like to quickly move on to Prof. Panot and just ask him, because Indonesia has a huge population and a lot of youth, especially entering higher education. So, Prof, what is your vision for UKM in terms of the development of Indonesian youth, also for the ASEAN region?
Yes, thank you, Pak Daniel. Yeah, not only for Indonesia, yeah, but for Indonesia, of course, we want to develop our universities in Indonesia to give good or best education to our people. That's why the development of the university in Indonesia is very important. So we want that the graduate from junior or senior high school as many as possible, as much as possible, they enter to the university. And now only about 32% of our high school graduate entering to the university. It is
32%.
Yeah, 32, around 32%. So it is the problem. So we want to increase the number of students in Indonesia. That's why the quality is very important. I think in Indonesia, the problem about the university is the quality of the professor, the quality of the equipment or facilities. So it is the job of the government to increase the quality of the higher education in Indonesia. And in the case for ASEAN country, I believe that we can improve our university through collaboration, strengthen our collaboration among the university in ASEAN. And also we have to modernize our equipment, our technology, and also make enough of the profession. Yeah. So if the quality of education in ASEAN countries become better, we sure that there will be a lot of people coming to ASEAN region to pursue the education. Yeah.
Does UKM have a big international student population?
Yes.
Like, how big?
Like UKM. If we can do this case, I believe that the university can accelerate the development and progress of the ASEAN countries. Yeah. So we want to attract a lot of students from all over the world coming to ASEAN countries to pursue their education. To do that, so the quality of education, the quality of universities in ASEAN must be improved together. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor. I'd like to move on to Dr. Anita. And some of the points that I mentioned earlier was about government's role in providing support, resources, funding, as well as autonomy moving forward. And, Dr. Anita, you were the Deputy Permanent Secretary of Higher Education previously. What are your thoughts on this issue and how this impacts the university's ability to become a greater player within ASEAN and the global community?
I totally agree with what has been said so far with regards to autonomy. I do feel it's a very important issue. In Brunei, we have 4 universities and they're all public universities. But at the moment, we're not fully autonomous. And I think it's similar to what Professor Hamdi was saying earlier on. Although we are a state board, but however, functionally, we're not fully autonomous yet. So I do agree that universities should be autonomous, and that's something that we're working on at the university. So we've set up deadlines and our milestone on how we can achieve at least towards full autonomy. And I think with full autonomy, with less bureaucracy, with more empowerment, and I think that will allow universities to develop significantly. So yes, I do agree with that. But like Professor Tan was saying earlier on, and I think with autonomy as well, we do need continuous government support, and especially during this COVID-19 period. And I think a lot of governments are very stretched in terms of funding. So that makes universities to be more corporate in nature as well.
That's right.
So we're looking for other sources of funding, and I think with a lot of collaborations with other stakeholders as well. So coming back to your question, yes, and I think that's something that we as well, now I'm on the other side, but we did agree with that as well when I was on the other side, and I think that's very important for universities.
All right, thank you. I'd like this. So what we heard earlier, ladies and gentlemen, was about the role that ASEAN universities can play in terms of synergy as well as the challenges. And Dr. Anita also pointed out something very interesting, which is now we are all facing COVID-19 and its impact onto lives and livelihoods. I'd like to stay with you, Dr. Anita, for the next question and to start us on this COVID-19 segment. So during these trying times, the universities have had to change and pivot in many ways, right? From teaching and learning to also internationalization. Could you share with us some of the challenges that you have faced and what is being done by the university to face them?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure we have common challenges as well, not just within ASEAN, but across the world as well. Brunei had its first COVID-19 case on the 9th of March. I remember that very clearly. But within the first 3 days of the first report of our COVID-19 case in Brunei, we went fully online. And I think that was possible. We were able to do it very quickly. And I think that was possible because we have been practicing blended learning for several years. Although the quick change did have some shock to some staff and students as well, but we managed to do it within the first 3 days. So a lot of things went online, not just learning fully online, but our online assessment, our student services, staff had to be working from home with some with staggered attendance. So we minimize or social contacts as much as possible. We put up QR codes at every buildings so that we could track people coming in and out of buildings and so forth. But Alhamdulillah, I think we're very lucky in Brunei. The government has done very well. So the COVID-19 situation is very well controlled. Our borders are still closed, but Brunei at the moment is undergoing de-escalation stages rather. So we're now going into blended learning. So we're now looking into moving forward. What is it for UBD? So we've decided that we're going for structured blended learning, and that's to continue.
What does that mean?
Which is more students.
Structured blended learning?
So initially in the past, we had blended learning, but it was more of optional. Some were doing it better than others. But now, because it is the norm for us, although we're on de-escalation, there's still some lectures going fully online, especially the big classes. But this is, bottom line is ensuring quality, quality in the curriculum, quality in our instructional delivery, and so forth. So our blended learning is more structured. We ensure that learning outcomes are met, quality in the pedagogy. We get a lot of feedbacks from staff and students. So this involves a lot of unlearning and relearning for our academic staff. Maybe I just give an example because they're different, because we don't prescribe that staff needs to be doing one particular model. So for example, there would be, I mean, just very briefly, because I don't want to take too much time explaining this. So for example, for big classes, they will be pre-recorded. So one module, for example, we pre-record their module. And that would include, for example, they could put in graphs or some clips of videos, for example. So students can access to these videos anytime. So they can be doing it at home, in cafes, for example. And they need to do this before they attend their face-to-face tutorials. But some modules, prior to having these face-to-face tutorials, they would have quizzes to test the student. So this would allow professor to know how the whole class is performing, whether they understand the learning objectives and outcomes, and they will be able to pinpoint the weak students as well. So in that way, they may have a one-to-one or maybe smaller groups before the tutorials or around the time of tutorials. So that's the kind of more structured to ensure, because we want to ensure that students are getting what they should get. They should be getting, the take home is the learning objectives and learning outcomes. So we're restructuring our blended learning to make sure students are getting what they should be getting. But we were talking about challenges, and I think there will be commonalities, but there are three things to challenges. One is our strategy. What is our strategy? Number two is handling crisis, because there were quite a number of crises. As we know, COVID-19 is unpredictable. And the third one is the people factor. But handling strategy is very easy. Handling crisis is also easy to manage, but it's handling the people. And I think you're handling your students, you're handling your staff as well. So it's adapting to the new norms, like I was saying earlier, relearning for everyone. But what I would like to stress here, what's most important, I think, in handling people is communication, communication, communication. And I think it's having clear communication, regular, especially with the changes, and through different channels. We also not only have feedbacks, we created a hotline phone as well for staff, students, and for public as well.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry, if you don't mind, I would like to move on because we can come back to this a little bit later, because COVID is obviously a very interesting topic of discussion. Prof. Panut, if I could come to you very quickly, because Indonesia, with its large population, what are the challenges that you have faced at UKM in terms of handling with the crisis? Maybe if you can share 3 or 4 challenges and what the university has done.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah,
thanks.
At the beginning is the difficulties to make a decision about the lecturing and also community services, because the pandemic come on ongoing semester in March, and at the time there are a lot of our students in the field for community services, and also the lecturing. Most of the professors like face-to-face lecturing in the classroom, even though before pandemic was coming, the regulation in UKM is until 40% of the content of the lecture can be delivered online, but most of the professor is prefer to do face-to-face lecturing in the classroom. And the difficulties at the time is a lot of opinion. Should we switch directly to the online system? And should we withdraw our students in the field because of a pandemic? So a lot of opinion at the time.
What was decided then by you and the team?
I invited and discussed with the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, and also asking to the expert in health and pandemic. Then I was decided to switch to the online system for the lecturing and withdraw all the students to come back to the Jakarta. And after that, the difficult problem is about the research. Should we convert to the research funding for the research for the pandemic problem, to face the pandemic problem, or continue for the initial for the research already planned before the pandemic was coming. And after we discussed it, some of the research topics should be switched to the pandemic problem. So there was a lot of problem facing by director, but with the discussion with the colleagues, and then we can decide it based on our discussion with the experts. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. I'd like to move on to Prof. Hamdi. And one of the things that Prof. Panut had mentioned was how COVID, as well as Dr. Anita has mentioned, how it's impacted research, learning, and people and communication. What was your experience in UKM in sort of getting that shift to happen, whether it's online learning or whether it's maybe doing more research within the campus grounds and not really going to the field because of the limitations? If you could share with us.
Thank you, Daniel. After a couple of months of this COVID, I think the experience gone through by most universities are very, very similar. Less number of students in campus. We don't have that many of the international students coming over. Our people have to work from home, and we have to kind of being very agile in responding to the new environment. After a while, we become quite mature in our response. Our SOP, standard operating procedures, are quite matured as well. And we are comfortable with what we are doing now because we know how to handle the situation. I believe the response are very, very similar, just like being mentioned by my colleagues just now. The only thing is that the question from the UKM side and other universities in Malaysia particularly is the ability to attract the international students, which we are having momentum for a number of years. And now we are suddenly seeing much less people coming into our universities. The way I look at it is that we transform and find new ways of dealing with this. It is a blessing in disguise in a way. Previously, people are reluctant in doing online teaching. This blended learning is gaining traction slowly, but with COVID, people are forced to actually go online, and we have tons of material now that we can actually save in our system, and we see new avenue that we can actually do online distance learning. People cannot come to our universities, but they can actually register and follow us through online and virtually. And this has opened up new opportunity, which we have never seen before. So our campus is limited in capacity. We can house around 30,000. But by having online distance learning, we can actually double that capacity by retaining the current infrastructure, and we need to improve our infrastructure, obviously. So again, looking at the challenges, it has opened up new opportunities, and we are quite agile in moving around these challenges. And we have seen now that we saw lots of new opportunities coming over. When we are having a conference, for example, they are only attended by 100, 200 maximum. Now our conferences can be attended by 400, 500. So the far-reaching impact on a pandemic has resulting in us moving around the challenges by opening up new opportunities. So it is very exciting. At the same time, we are opening up new doors and see what are the things that we can still venture into. Daniel?
Thank you very much, Prof. That was very insightful. And I also agree that how we can expand the scope. I'm looking at the list of people here, and some are from Laos, the Philippines, which if we did it just physical and we thought of it as being a venue, we were quite limited. Professor Tan, if I can come to you next. So similarly in the same vein, what has NUS seen as its greatest challenges because of COVID-19, as well as the opportunities that it presents? If you could share with us some of your thoughts.
Well, what my colleagues have shared quite similar. We have sort of activated the new academic year. We're trying to keep life as normal as possible. Of course, the safety of our community is key of our concerns, right? So we have online instruction for classes that are 50 and above. For classes that are under 50, we still have face-to-face instruction. And we have also a series of measures, right, such as zoning within the university, to help basically mitigate any spread of the illness. On the research front, we are quite happy that we have responded pretty well. So, we were the first to culture the virus, and we also actually linked up a serological test to help with contact tracing. We have a vaccine under consideration. We also have been working in several areas, especially point of care test kits. In fact, we have 6 projects on point of care test kits, which we hope to be able to launch them and productize them sometime towards the end of this year. I think our major concern is really the job situation of our graduating class of 2020. And we are fortunate in this particular aspect because the government came up with this job support scheme that provides partial support of jobs across the whole country. That was quite a big investment by the government. And particularly, it pays 100% of the salary up to about $4,600 for the months where we are under the circuit breaker. That is in April and in May, where everything stopped, right? Nothing moves. And this has helped. And the university, we have, using this job support scheme, come out with a resilience and growth initiative. And basically, there are 4 areas. One, it provides support for students who suddenly becomes financially
challenged because of COVID?
I mean, who actually go into dire financial circumstances because of COVID-19. So we have had financial aid for students, and now we are basically making the access easier and providing more support for this group of students and also the groups whose financial situation has become very bad because of COVID-19. We have, the second thing is we have provided 800 traineeships, partially supported by the government, and 200 jobs for our new graduates. So about 1,000 positions that are available for our new graduates. We have also, for all graduates, as well as graduates who have graduated last year as well, free courses, 4 free courses under our continuing education framework. This is really to keep them occupied while they are waiting for their jobs. We expect them to wait much longer for their jobs. So we thought that it would be useful if they can equip themselves with new skill sets and competencies by our continuing education framework.
How involved was NUS as an institution in part of crafting these economic packages that the government announced? Just wanted to know the level of involvement.
Well, the government actually had their ministerial task force to create that. And this was mainly done by the Ministry of Finance. I think for the first time, I think our government has actually put out a tremendous amount of their reserves, right, to help Singapore as a whole. And the key thing is really how to sustain jobs, how to keep jobs. Then the last thing which we did was to come out with an innovation challenge, which we encourage our students or our graduates, if they have not had a job, to consider using their time to help the society. So it comes under 3 themes on how to help a person to become a better person, or how to help the society to become a better society, or how to make a more inclusive world. So these are innovation challenge where we would provide stipends for graduates to be engaged for about 6 to 9 months while they are waiting for their jobs. So these are the 4 things that we have actually made available to the graduating class of 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wide-ranging sharing. I think it was very interesting, especially the government's role. Just a time check, we are at 11:15. I think we've got about 15 minutes, 20 minutes left. So what I'd like to do now is we've got some questions which have been submitted by the audience. And what I will do is I will raise them and I will inform which panelists would like to get some thoughts on, if that's okay. Can we go to the, are the members of the panel okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So the first question is from Bethel Zipangan from the Philippines. And the question is, how can we nail values so deeply to our colleagues in a way not to hurt them? Is it okay to impose strictness and reprimand them if necessary? And I think the context of this question is, of course, values differ from person to person. And sometimes, you know, we need to be very firm in adapting values. Who would like to share their thoughts on this particular question? Prof. Panut, would you like to?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
please.
It is. I think the rather difficult thing. Yeah. How we affirming values to the human resources in the institution.
Yes.
We as a leader, but as a leader, we have to affirm the values to all of the university members, university leadership, lecturer, supporting staff, student, and even to the alumni. So for I myself is UGM is focusing on serving people, responding the need of the people, solving the problem of the society. So to do so, the UGM quality must excellent. So let us working together. Let us doing effort together to make more contribution of our institution to the society, to the nation. But we thought the incentive, encouraging incentive.
So it's incentives, right?
It is difficult. So the leader should creative to make some activity
right.
And spending incentive.
Right. Oh, okay. Spending incentive.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. And maybe
can I add?
Yes, please, of course, Prof.
Yeah. So there are certain values that I think most universities will treasure a lot. For instance, integrity and honesty. Those, I think, if a faculty or staff member breaches it, we have to be very firm and have to be very tough.
Right.
Right. Because this can adversely affect the reputation of a university. For instance, if you plagiarize or you cheat in a research, I think you have to come in very strong, right? Or possibly even sack the person, because this is something which most universities do not condone. However, if a faculty member is less innovative, all right, or who only wants to cruise along and just do enough, this is where the incentives will come in. Normally, I think incentives are better than punishments.
Right.
And this is one area which I agree with Professor Pano, that if you can incentivize your people towards, say, innovation, towards building towards excellence, that would be important. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Anita or Prof. Hamdi, would you like to chip in on these thoughts on the carrot or the stick approach in that kind of realizing of values? Maybe some examples if you've got experiences in dealing with this crisis. How do you say people management?
It is first.
Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
I think Professor Tan mentioned about values like integrity or cheating, which I suppose in all universities would have their own SOP in terms of having disciplinary boards and so forth. But talking about values, I mean, university values, the ones that we mentioned earlier before, and I think for every person in the university, it's very important that they are very clear with university values. In addition, of course, to knowing the university's vision, mission, and university strategy. So I think values must be embraced by every person. It must be stressed, the importance of the values to every person. And this is intertwined, the values are intertwined with our core businesses of teaching, research, and so forth. And it must be embedded in day-to-day operations and our developmental initiatives. So I just give an example here. For example, in our promotion. So normally in promotion, you would look at that teaching and learning. For example, in there would be a peer review, student feedback, innovation in teaching, and so forth. And in research, there'll be a number of measures that you look criteria during promotion. How many publications, the impact of publication, and so forth. But in addition, in UBD, we also look at how the person embraces values of the university. So for example, I mentioned people, because how we center a lot of our initiatives around people. So when we see a particular person going up for promotion, so for example, we look at his work or her work and see whether how much work this person has done with other people, for example, in developing junior faculties, academic leadership, and so forth. That actually affects promotion. So we would bounce back that promotion application. So, the dean will need to work on what particular areas the person needs to work on. So values is as important as the core businesses of the university, like teaching, learning, research, innovation, enterprise, and so forth. But this has to be made very clear to everyone in the university, albeit staff or students. It's the same with excellence awards. It's the same with contract renewals and so forth, and recruitment and so forth. So I think it's very important that they do know what they're in for. So in this way, we ensure that people would actually embrace values.
All right, thank you. So it's as much about nurture and mentorship as it is about reprimand. Prof. Hamdi, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. This is very related to our value-based leadership theme that we are talking about today. We have seen seas of changes, the global economy, innovation and changes, pressure and competition and whatnot. And it is more disturbing when we see that there are some reports saying that only a third of our workforce are actually working. The other 2/3 are basically buying in time and putting in time, basically, and even some, unfortunately, going against the institution. So with this backdrop, values is becoming very important in an institution like ours. And value actually drive behavior. People do something, behave in certain way due to the values that they subscribe. For example, if we look at a lot of stories of a burning house, the mother comes out and realize that, oh, the kids is still in the burning house. The mother will actually bravely run back to save the kids, and most of the time we have to strangle her, otherwise she will be burned as well. Why is the mother acting like this? It is because she values the kids more than herself. Hence, the behavior of wanting to sacrifice herself to save the kids. So this is the importance of value. And failing to embed values into the workforce is very catastrophic, where people do things without proper values. And it is incumbent upon the university to really choose the values and ensuring the values are embedded in each staff and students alike. So this is why values is very important. Otherwise, value is just things that we put on the wall,
Right.
and
Yeah.
nobody actually cares about values. You know, they don't even know what it means to them. So how do we actually internalize this value into our workforce? I think that's the issue that
That's right. Yes.
we have to look into, and how these translate into behavior and eventually into performance. So we are talking about cultural issue here. We want this to be part of culture. I'll give you an example. Why people do research? Is it because they are culturally having passion in doing research, or they want to get professorship? You know, so this is the question.
Right.
After getting professorship, they don't do any more research because they're already at the pinnacle of their career. So again, it goes back to values, and how do we make sure that this value become culture in the university? So this is a big issue, and big. You have to really put in strategy. And most of the time, we notice that it is not the strategy that produces performance. It's actually the culture, you know, that actually has a sustainable performance. So again, transforming values into culture of the workforce, I think is very, very crucial. And that's what I think the institution has to work on in a very focused manner to ensure the values are subscribed, the values are embedded and embraced by the workforce, and eventually turn that into the good culture.
Thank you. I think that was very, very interesting to understand. I like how you mentioned values, behavior, culture, performance, but it has to be internalized and it's proposed both intrinsic and extrinsic factors. I'd like to move on very quickly to another question from the audience. Resonates with me a little bit. And the question is, what are the efforts to promote youth participation in leadership? Prof. Hamdi, of course, I highlighted earlier, you were professor at 39 at UM, and that was highly impressive. And all our speakers here obviously have started somewhere and in part as part of their journey. So perhaps, the question also goes, we see today that leaders look down on the youth, and that has made some of the succession planning not very effective. And this is from Muhammad Arif from Malaysia. Perhaps if I can get some thoughts, maybe Prof. Hamdi, you can start with this. You can start on this question, if that's okay.
Yeah, that was a very interesting question. Probably I'm one of the youngest here. I'm not even 50 yet. So I have strong belief in the young, because I think at the age of 50, like me, next year, I'll be going off in 10 years time, and the institution will be handed over to the young ones, and they are the future of the university. They are the future of the country, actually, if you look at it from that point of view. So therefore, investing in the young is paramount important in the case of UKM. We put lots of emphasis on the young, because we believe that they will be the one who will be replacing us, and they will be the torch bearer. And if we actually make mistake in bringing in the wrong youngs into the system, then we are going to face lots of issues in the future. So we never look down upon the young. We put lots of emphasis. I establish a group we identify the potential young leaders from each faculty and institute, and we have a special session with them, special discussion with them, and put them in a very strategic position for them to get exposure, and hopefully one day we rise to the occasion when the time comes for us to hand over the torch. So again, I personally feel that we have to put lots of emphasis on the young, invest in them, and ensuring them that they will be much greater than us, much better than the current team and the team of leaders that we have. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I suppose you're right. It's always about creating or nurturing for continuity and sustainability, and also you want to see the youth do better and better and better. Are there any of the panelists who would like to comment on that, or can I move on to another question if that's okay, because we've got quite a few to go through? Members of panel, I think we're okay to probably go to another question. Prof. Pandit, did you want to say something? Sorry, I saw you.
Yeah, just maybe continue to the continue to the next question.
Okay, sure thing. So the next question is from Casey Boy from Melbourne, and he asked, how best can tertiary institutions or universities engage with the wider society to share their knowledge and to help inform public policy within their country and across ASEAN nations? And I suppose it's the role of the university in society and governance. If you could. Prof. Panut, would you like to share some?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. I think the role of the university in the society and also in the government, it is very important. And through our research, the university research can be used for the government as the development of the policy. Yeah, and of course in UKM, a lot of research done by UKM influence the government of Indonesia, and also we have a lot of collaboration with some university abroad, not only in ASEAN. Of course, we have a lot of collaboration with ASEAN university to do research together, and I think some of the government consider the research done by the university to develop and make the policy of the government. Yes, I think it is very big, the role of the university in make or give the direction for the government policy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And of course, earlier you mentioned about the research from the medical side contributing. Prof. Tan, would you like to add in a little bit about that? Because you also commented earlier on the role that you've played with the government to craft policies, especially during these COVID times.
Yeah. Well, this is actually a very broad question, and
yes,
we can spend a lot of time talking about it. But let's say that I think engagement with governments, I think it is important because universities have tremendous expertise, but we need to have our voice and our views, especially based on our expertise, heard by the government. And you'll find that sometimes this may not even work in the most developed country.
Right.
Take COVID-19 as an example, where the evidence from science is so stark, right? Yet some very developed countries decided to basically ignore the evidence presented by science. I don't have to name the country. I think all of us know which country does that. But it's also fortunate that in many of our countries, the public actually have a better appreciation of science, right? But it is onus on the universities too, to be able to convey science in a way that it is understandable to the general public.
Yep, true.
Right. So I'm very happy that, for instance, at the start of the campaign, we use cartoons to really illustrate, where the dangers for COVID-19, how to prevent and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So universities have to think about, it's not just engaging the government. If you're engaging the society, you have to know the society has a very broad spectrum of people, and how we can effectively connect with them. You have to use different mechanisms.
Yeah. And what does NUS do in order to achieve that? So both in engaging with the society as well as the government?
Yeah.
Do you have like government relations people, etc.? Sorry, go ahead.
So like I've said, it is not an easy problem. It's always work in progress. We hope that we can do better, and each time we learn how to do better. We know, for instance, cartoons are very effective. Short messages are very effective. You don't want to write a 20-page paper and expecting the public to read it. That's very tough.
True.
All right. And we noticed that, for instance, the way in which World Economic Forum sort of flesh out some of the key ideas, that to be quite an effective way to engage a group of people, not all, but a group of people. So we are constantly trying to find out what better way to reach out to these people. And every society is very different. All right, it will be different in Indonesia, it'll be different in Malaysia, it'll be different in Brunei, it's different in Singapore. So we universities I think we do have the depth of resources, and we know how to assess it. Now, let me sort of present another issue, which I think will be extremely challenging. That's social media. Social media presents tremendous challenge, not just to Singapore, but to the entire society, to the entire world, right? And social media tend to manifest what are echo chambers, in the sense that you read something, the AI drivers behind social media will keep on sending the same thing that you read. You hear something and you like it, they will keep sending you everything. So you can perpetually be living in your echo chamber.
That's right.
And your views of the world, or just the immediate world outside of you, can be very different and can be very extreme too. I think that's a danger. So how can universities play a role, especially to the younger people? We know the younger people, our Generation X and Generation Y, the millennials, they are the ones who are very exposed to social media, much more than many of us here. All right. And engaging them, you need to engage them in a different way. And you can be quite sure that if you try to engage them in social media, if you are not in their circle, you never reach them. So I think that's a big problem and a big issue. How can we basically engage with the youths of the future, right? Because social media, while it is a very powerful tool, it also has its disadvantages. Thank you.
I agree. Yes, thank you. And being a press secretary in a ministry, I have to deal with the press and social media every day, so I can very much resonate with that. Maybe Dr. Anita, do you have any thoughts on this challenge which is highlighted by Prof. Tan, and what is UBD doing about it? Not just in terms of addressing the challenges, but it's also like a very potent marketing tool, especially in these challenging times. Any thoughts?
Well, very complex issue, as Professor Tan was saying about social media. Pros and cons, like you said, we leverage on social media for our promotion, for marketing. It's very quick. You can just viral a message or something that you want to promote very, very quickly. And the coverage is amazing, how it can reach a huge, wide population very quickly. But as Professor Tan mentioned, there's also this downside about news or messages or videos or clips that can be quite unhealthy for the population. Very difficult. And I think perhaps one of the, although it won't solve, because it depends on where the social media is viral as well, is communication, how quickly you can step in. So communication, because for example, there could be, if it is news within the university, once you detect this, is to quickly step in and communicate to the wider community with regards to saying what is actually the truth behind it. And I think if it's something at the national level, it's something that the government can do. And I think we did this very well during this COVID-19 pandemic, because there were so many messages, wrong messages circulated about COVID-19 pandemic. So again, it boiled down to communication. And I think what the government did very well was that they had, initially we had daily updates on COVID-19 pandemic. And this was done by the Minister of Health. So he would quickly correct what is right and probably put forward what was actually happening. So we had we still are having regular press conferences, not just by Minister of Health, but relevant ministers as well. So I think that helped to actually die down the dangerous messages. But I think for other things that happen on social media, especially one that is viral globally, you can't control what's happening overseas. So, but I think communication can be one of the powerful tools to actually help control it in a certain, to a certain level. So I think key is also communication and how quickly we step in.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. All right. The MC has just signaled that we've got 10 minutes left. And what I will do is I've got one last question each for the panelists. And it's quite diverse. So if you don't mind me just starting with Prof. Panut first. Professor, I watched online on YouTube during the Wawancara Opsi Metro TV. This was about almost 1 year ago. And to the question about university rankings, one of the things you said was, what's important is, if I may quote, bisa bekerja lebih baik untuk bangsa dan negara. It's being able to work better for the country and the people. 9 months down the line, now that we've faced COVID, what are your thoughts on what the priorities for higher education institutions in ASEAN moving forward for the future?
For the future, yes. We need collaboration, among the university in ASEAN, closer and strengthen and strong collaboration among us. I want that our young talent not go to the far location in the world, but we want that the young talent from ASEAN country nurturing the education in ASEAN region. And as we said before that, we want to attract young people from all over the world to study in ASEAN country. So if we can do it, I believe that the ASEAN region will be developed faster. And also with the ASEAN motto, one vision, one identity, one community, let us do together, let us make a strong collaboration to develop the university in ASEAN. Thank you, sir. So much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Panut. Next, I'd like to ask Dr. Anita one more question. And the question goes, how do you see the role of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as part of the ASEAN higher education landscape and its importance moving forward?
Okay, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And I think within ASEAN, well, especially for UBD, they are also incorporated across the core domains of the university. And I think if you were to support that, you have to ensure that it's incorporated across your core businesses or domains. That means through your teaching and learning, through your research, what you innovate, your enterprise, your internationalization, and even your governance. So incorporation into your operational but as well as your developmental initiatives. If I just give an example of what we do at the university,
Sure.
our undergraduate programs are very broad-based. They're interdisciplinary, so we'd like to nurture our students so that they can think outside their discipline and become future-ready graduates. But within our programs, there are three key principles that cuts across our programs. That is leadership and innovation, entrepreneurship, and environmental awareness. So whatever programs you do, those are the three principles. So leadership, we've had a lot of talk in this. It's something that we have to nurture in our students, especially being the main university of the country, because our students will be the future leaders of the country. Entrepreneurship, it doesn't mean that everyone needs to become businessman or businesswoman, but it's just creating this entrepreneurial mindset that they can create nothing, they can create something out of nothing or with limited resources. And I think this is in one of the SDGs as well. And of course, environmental protection, environmental awareness. So for example, our engineering students would be aware of the environment, for example, in using their materials and so forth. But within our program as well, we have a year of mandatory year out of the university.
Right.
Which
like
is
a gap year of sorts.
Exactly. So it's mandatory. You don't do it, you don't graduate. So it's part of the curriculum. So, but we allow students to have a choice whether they want to go overseas to do study abroad through student exchanges with one of our partner universities. The second one is internship with industry companies. The third one is incubation. So they may be creating their own businesses before they graduate. And the fourth one is substantive community outreach projects. So they work with the community, not just within Brunei, but also overseas. So they may be going to South Thailand, for example. We've had students going to Indonesia as well, Cambodia, and so forth. Some of them are teaching basic English or teaching basic computer skills or basic Malay. Normally, some would be going to underprivileged schools or schools run by volunteers or teachers paid very low wages. So those are just examples, but most of our students, about 80% of our students leave the country.
Right.
And they're dispersed throughout the world because we make sure that they are well dispersed. But other initiatives that support the SDGs in our teaching and learning would include our entrepreneurship village, which services all students. We have the University Startup Center, which is mainly alumni coming back. So we support them when they leave the university as well. We have, for example, our Center for Lifelong Learning, which continues to upskill and reskill, not just alumni, but the community as well, because they don't have to leave jobs to go on to the program. And things like our programs as a whole, it's very affordable. Most students are on scholarships. If not, there are special funds to help those from underprivileged backgrounds. It's amazing how community can come together, especially alumni, in helping students. So those would be just some brief initiatives under teaching and learning, how we support the 17 SDGs. But again, there are other activities as well under research as well, and other core documents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Lee. Nice to see that UBD has such a strong core couched in the UN SDGs. Prof. Tan, I'd like to come to you next for the last question. And so how the question goes is, ASEAN universities have always looked up to NUS in terms of its achievements, rankings being one of the indicators that we've discussed a little bit earlier. So I think moving forward, what role do you see NUS playing in terms of both this value-based leadership as well as what it can offer, for the ASEAN counterparts as in moving forward together?
Well, thanks. This question which I've been thinking about too. And I like to echo Professor Panut's point that there has to be greater collaborations across ASEAN universities. One of the important areas is in the development of young faculty members, right? Because all of us know that the talent and expertise of the university, faculty members are very critical. So how can we develop the faculty members? I do know that there is quite a lot of, I would say, exchanges, but I think there can be more exchanges so that young faculty members can be exposed to faculty members across the whole of ASEAN. And NUS will be very pleased to sort of provide access to young embodying ASEAN faculty, sometime in NUS, perhaps half a year to 1 year, right, where they can actually interact and engage with our faculty members as well, and therefore build links with other ASEAN countries. I think using faculty members as sort of the link makers or the people who create the bridges will be one important aspect in order to have a more consolidated region. So that's one. The second one is that I would encourage actually to have actually more student exchanges, and I have been trying to encourage. Currently, a lot of our students go overseas, but most of them would want to go to US and Europe.
They miss ASEAN, they just kind of go a bit further.
Yeah, and the thing is that, look here, ASEAN is such an important region. We have a much bigger population. The potential for growth is so huge. And ASEAN is just next door to Singapore. All right, why don't we look at ASEAN? So trying to encourage our students to go to ASEAN countries is something which I'm also working very hard towards. So if I can have more of my students either spend time, do a student exchange in one of the top ASEAN universities, and likewise having ASEAN faculty members spend time at respective, I think that would form a very good foundation for us to be more synergistic in terms of universities in the region. That, I guess, would be the first step. All right, if we can get by this first step, then I think there's tremendous potential for all ASEAN universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Tan. I definitely subscribe to the idea of building links as well as greater mobility among students as a way to bridge, this ASEAN community and the values. And last but not least, Professor Hamdi, the question I have for you is, you founded Advanced Center in Engineering as well as the IR 4.0 Center. So what I noticed is you're always very forward-looking, about the evolution. Simple question, what do you foresee as the future values, not just of UKM, but also of kind of like ASEAN higher education as a whole? And feel free to comment on any of the earlier comments as well.
Thank you, Daniel. Very interesting question. For me, the ASEAN universities have got huge potential, as mentioned by my colleagues, not only because of our locations and our numbers, but also because of culture embedded in ASEAN. There's a huge disparity between universities in each country. And the challenges that we are facing, particularly in Malaysian university, is really the financial strength. And it is a serious matter, because no matter what strategies that we have put in, and no matter what plan that we have already put forward, but without the financial strength, we can't really move further than just doing what we have. So this is the real challenge, and the pandemic has worsened this, where allocation for universities are not forthcoming, not enough and not insufficient. Universities is no more a pure cost center. The leadership in the university has to look beyond the shore and we are being seen, or we have to act like as a profit center as well. So this, the training that is been received by the vice chancellors are insufficient for the person to actually goes into being a profit center. But again, whether the person like or not, the leadership of the university has to look into that, because wanting the government, for example, to put forward the financial help might not be wise, because it is going to be more difficult in the future. And universities require a different skill set in terms of leadership in order to really find ways of generating income for the university. So this is the greatest challenge for Malaysian universities. I know some other countries might not be facing that, but this is a true challenge in the Malaysian universities. And without a proper solution, I think it will really hamper progress. And instead of looking at the excellence in academic and also research, we have to kind of thinking of focusing our energy into generating income for the university to sustain the institution. So we can't move forward fast enough if these challenges in this financial aspect is not resolved quickly and amicably. Otherwise, universities keep on talking about this issue day in and day out without a proper solution. And it is now becoming heavier to the leadership in the university due to COVID, because the income coming from students and other activities has really shelved or has reduced significantly. So that worries me as a vice chancellor, because my energy again has been divided into looking at that area where I would have thought that I should be focusing more into pushing for research and academic, preparing graduates for the nation, and looking at collaboration, bringing industry inside the universities and so on. And when the whole economy is going down, the industry might not have enough money to sponsor research. Government has not enough money to push into universities, and the private students are not coming over. International students are not getting into the system. So all these compounding effect is really pushing the university to a corner, and is getting a bit worrying now. So we need to learn how to really come out of this conundrum. Otherwise, we will be there for quite some time, and we'll be in trouble. So yeah, I wish to end my points there, because we cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we are struggling to move within the limitation, which is actually now squeezing the university further. University wants to progress, and progress means that we need a lot more financial assistance from everywhere, but that's not forthcoming. So again, whatever we do, either conforming to the SDG or pushing the function of university for society forward, but without the proper financial strength, I think university will be struggling.
Thank you so much, Professor. In fact, I had written that down, but I didn't come to that question. So what I actually written earlier was, how does one remain steadfast to the values of access and ensuring people get education, but also balance the economic motivation? And thank you so much for actually addressing that in your closing remarks. And I agree with you. These are also real challenges that we face. Being at the finance ministry, we are dealing with finance day in and day out. And yes, it is a challenging time. But I believe then, I suppose, moving forward, if we can collaborate, but if the values are clear, God willing, we'll be able to overcome this. So once again, thank you so much. It's been a true honor and pleasure for me to host such a distinguished panel from Indonesia, Brunei, Singapore, and of course, Malaysia. I once again thank all of you for your insights. The comments on the chat box are very positive. Sorry for those who are watching and I couldn't ask your questions. Time is not on our side. But if you could join me on a virtual round of applause for our panelists. Of course, we can't hear you, but I'm sure everyone is clapping wherever you are. Thank you again, and I shall now return the floor to Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Latif. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel Rahman. An amazing educational academic session for all of us. I couldn't remember the last time we had such prominent individuals to share their experiences and also what they have gone through and all their success story with all of us. I would like to personally thank the moderator, Mr. Daniel Rahman, and also all the presidents, vice chancellors and rectors, Professor Tan, Professor Hamdi, Datin, Dr. Anita, and also Professor Panot for allocating this time for all of us. We would like to give our thanks to AKEPT under the helm of Prof. Nordin for initiating this program and bringing all these excellent experts and leaders to share their experiences with us. To the Ministry of Higher Education as well, and to University Kebangsaan Malaysia. It's also a teamwork of various departments from the International Relations Center, the Faculty of Medicine, and also the IT Center, who has actually assisted us in realizing the day. Special thanks to the International Office of University Brunei Darussalam, National University of Singapore, and Universitas Gajah Mada for also being able to invite and bring your presidents and rectors and vice chancellors to join all of us. Now, in the true ASEAN style of a tradition, I would have invited all of you for some refreshments or some makan session right after this event. But with this new normal, sadly, we are unable to be permitted to do so. But we hope that one day we would be able to gather this spectacular group of panelists for physical meet as well. Yeah. So thank you to all the panelists again for allocating the time for today's event and sharing your insights. But before we end today's session, we would like to commemorate the day with a virtual photo taking session, if that's possible. If all the panelists and moderators would give their biggest smile in the count of 3. All right. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. So thank you once again. Thank you very much. Definitely a historical day to gather such 4 prominent individuals to all of us. Specifically to all the attendees here, you know, we've seen the numbers have been growing and we're just amazing for all of you. We're just amazed with all of you staying over for 2 hours to be part of this important day for all of us. Now, ladies and gentlemen, AKEPT in collaboration with University Kebangsaan Malaysia will be organizing future webinar events, and we hope to be in touch and we'll keep you posted and hope that you will join all of us again. Once again, thank you very much to the panelists, moderator, and all of you who have allocated your time. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Working your VC. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Yes.
Thank you.